Hello, this is Matthew with Outfishing 13 bringing you another Zebco reel service video today. What I'm going to be working on today by request is the Zebco Omega Pro ZO3. Let's get started. Okay, here's the Omega Pro. This is the one of the top of the line bait casters. I'd say there's only one Zebco reel that's better than this one, and that's the Bullet. Now the other one that's really nice is just the Omega. I don't have one of those, but they're very similar. This is an all metal construction reel, but the gears on it on the inside are all brass. Plus it has an instant anti-reverse, has an ambidextrous handle that can be switched from one side to the next. So like any of my videos, I tell you what you're going to need. You're going to need some grease, and I use a Lucas gear grease and a tri-flow grease. You need some good reel oil. For this particular project, you're going to need a small Phillips screwdriver. Okay. And you might need a big screwdriver, a little pair of needle nose pliers, maybe a small screwdriver. Okay. You might need a brush, something to keep your little parts in. But let's get started. The first thing we need to do is take the front apart. So we need to take the front cone on this off. The front comes off by spinning it counterclockwise. Oh, it helps to push the button to put the pickup pins down. And you can take that off. This particular reel comes with triple pickup pins, which are really nice. To take the spinner cone off, you hold onto the handle and turn it to the left, and it'll spin right off. That's what the inside looks like. It has 3 pickup pins in there. To remove spool, tighten the drag. So you tighten the drag, and then it says unlock by turning it this way. So you turn it that way and then pull it off. So there's 2 little Phillips screws down in those holes, and that's where you need the small screwdriver, like my pink one. Okay, so you take that one off, and you loosen this one, and then the back comes off. Okay? When the back comes off, this drag wheel is just going to fall out, which is okay. It just sits in here like so. Okay. The Omega Pro comes with an oscillating spool. It moves back and forth, and that is accomplished by a little cam that's on the back here that as it goes around, it moves back and forth right there. See that little thing that pushes it back and forth? So to take the rest of this apart here and to service the drag, we need to take this screw off right here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the handle off, and then we can easily get to that part right there. These come with a cap over the top of the screw. So there's the cap, and then there's the screw. Okay. It's attached to that screw, and then the handle comes out, and there's also this piece right there, and then the handle actually has a screw on it, a little screwdriver. Okay. It has a little spring washer on it. Okay, now we can take this whole mechanism apart right here. Now, one of the things that you'll notice on this is there's no way to service the drag washers themselves. It's all enclosed in this frame right here. If you wanted to service the drag, you're going to have to buy this whole piece right here. Okay, now that we have that off, we can concentrate on finishing the back here. So we need to take a couple of bearings out. There's a bearing down in there and a bearing down in there. Okay. Here's this piece here. That's what runs the oscillator spool. Okay. Here's the brass gear here. We'll clean that all up. Here's one bearing. Okay, and then there's the other. You need to remove these two little screws right here. They are bearing retaining screws. They hold that bearing in place. Okay, now we can take the center shaft out. There's a little shim washer. Make sure you don't lose that. And that's pressed on there, so there's no need to take that off. There's a bearing down in this nose here. Okay, this has a little spring keeper down in here. So you just need to get it out. You see it get in there with a sharp thing, and don't lose that little piece. And so get it on one side, then get it with your pliers. And get it the rest of the way out. Looks like a little hexagon. And then we can push the bearing out the front. Now here's the anti-reverse pawl as well. This has to go back in the same way. So it came out that way, and so that little black part right here, it needs to go back in that way. If you put it in the wrong way, it won't work properly. Okay, now we can clean this up. It doesn't need to be cleaned up a lot. I'm just going to wipe it out. All right. So I got all my parts cleaned up. I'm ready to start putting this back together. And we're going to put it back together in the reverse order that we took it apart. Before I do that, I'm going to take my reel oil and I'm going to put a little bit on these bearings here to let it start soaking in, since these are shielded bearings. Now this one is shielded on one side. Make sure you get that shielded side pointing to the outside when you put it back together. I'm going to put some oil on this bearing here and let it start soaking in. And one of the things that you want to know is you don't need a lot of grease on here, because what flips off will never get back on there again. Okay, we want to put some oil down in this shaft here, because when you every time you push the button in, it needs to slide along there. So the anti-reverse pawl goes in and has these little grooves. It needs to line up with the little grooves that go in there. So spin around until it just drops down in there, and then put your bearing in and seat it down in there all the way. Then take this little clip and start on one side and just carefully work it down in there, and you just need to push in there with your finger until it seats down in there, and then take a screwdriver that it's seated down in there, and it is. Okay, after I grease this up, I've got to make sure you put this little shim in here. Okay, it goes on the inside of there. And then it fits down in there like that, and then you can put your little bearing retainer screws back on here. hold that shaft and that bearing in there. Okay, so we want to start these bearings part way. We've got this greased up here, so we're ready to put this in there. And when you put it in there, there's a little shaft right here, a little groove, and it needs to line up with this little piece part right there. So set that in there, get the gears lined up, and then push those bearings It's a little bit tricky because you gotta get that shaft lined up on there just right. And there really is nothing that holds those bearings in place. There's no big bearing retainer clip or anything like that. But we got that on there. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and grease up this gear, this main gear. We'll just take some grease and put it on there and spin this around and put some more on there. If you just want to grease your reel every once in a while, this is what you can do. You can take the back off and grease it. Okay, now we're ready to put the front on. Before I do, I'm going to go ahead and grease this shaft right here. Okay, in order to service this, the only thing you can really do is get down in here and put some oil down in here. So you can put a little bit of oil around here to service this. Some oil down in these little slots right there. And that's about it. Okay, this part right there needs to go through that slot right there. And then you got to get it to line up. Okay, so here's the little screw right here. Okay, we can put the handle on. I like my handle on the left, but if you want to change it around, all you got to do is just take this one right here and put it over here on this side. But like I said, I like mine on the left. Okay, good and snug. Okay, we're ready to put the back on. We need to put this on here. So this just needs to go on here. I'm going to put a little bit of, now this, when this goes on, it goes right here in this little hole. So I want to put a little bit of grease right on this little shaft right there. Okay. I'm going to put a little bit of grease on that button right there in that little hole. That's where it goes right there. Okay. And hold that on. And then get your two little back screws here. And get them lined up and drop them in. Make them good and snug. Okay, I went ahead and wiped all the old grease out of this one right here, so I need to put some grease in there. And I'm going to use some of the lighter weight grease. But I want to make sure that these are greased up really well. Okay, I also want to make sure that this has grease in it too, right here on here, because this is where those cams run around on when as you're reeling. So you want that lubricated well. We need to put the spool on. So let's make sure that this is lubricated well here. The spool doesn't spin around on that, but you have to take it off and on, so you want it lubricated. I need to put some new line on that. So to put this back on, to lock it, you put it on here and get it, slide it down, and then turn it just a little bit. All right, it's locked in place. Now let's make sure it's oscillating correctly and the anti-reverse works. So I'm happy with that. So this doesn't oscillate a lot. It oscillates about 1/8 of an inch. But that's enough to really improve how the line gets wound on that spool. Okay. So that's on there. Put that on there. Now before you put the front cone on, push that in so the pins go in. You can put the little cap over here. The nice thing is you can change this with a penny, a nickel, or a quarter when you're out in the field. Okay. Nice and smooth. Last thing we want to do is take and add a little bit of oil to the handles. Just add a drop down in here and a drop down in there and let it soak in. All right, there you go. If you have any questions, make sure you write a comment below when you go ahead and service. But hopefully that helps you figure out how to service your reel for your Omega Pros or your Omega. But it's a very smooth reel, works very well. I've caught lots of fish with these reels, and they've served me really well. Anyways, thanks and have a great day the next time you go fishing. Bye.